Welcome back for the last time today, and this is your last chance to get the most out of the event by utilising all the functionalities on the RTM 365 platform, whether you want to share thoughts in the live chat or submit a question in the live Q&A. Up next, we have Lynn, Culture Lead for Safety Culture at Network Rail. Lynn will build on themes that we've covered already today by weaving the importance of workplace. Lynn will also lead us nicely into our next panel. So Lynn, the virtual stage is yours.
Hello. Today I'm going to talk to you about how culture creates a safer future. I will outline the 3 areas that you have covered today and how culture impacts on each of them. So today you have talked about workforce wellbeing, safety technology, and training and development. Culture impacts on how we approach each of these subjects, and each of these subjects in itself affects culture. So I'm going to take each one of them separately. Safety technology and culture. We often produce innovation and it's then left in a cupboard in a depot somewhere. Why does that happen? It happens because very often we haven't thought about the end user and prepared them to accept the technology. We've produced something that we know is really good. It'll prevent people being close to machinery, plants and trains. It'll make sure that the activity they're doing is simpler and more efficient. But we haven't got the people ready to use it and to feel that committed, confident and capable to use it. So let me talk through those a little bit more. Why commitment? Very often staff have a deep suspicion about technology. Best example I can give you is thinking about people where they have lookout warnings or they have technological solutions that are much safer than using a lookout. We have done a great job with our safety task force over the last couple of years to remove lookouts from most of our working, but we've had to do a lot of work with our staff who have been deeply suspicious of someone they can't see looking after them and trusting the tool. So we need to actually help our staff believe in the technology that we're giving them and help them be part of designing it and creating it so that they can fully understand why it's better for them to use. Secondly, people need to have the confidence to use that technology. The picture that's in there is a picture of a iPad, and very frequently we have put new technology, new apps, new processes, new systems onto an iPad for people, and they haven't used. We found that our frontline staff, although they've grown up, many of them in a technological age, are not very au fait with technology, and we haven't actually done the support that they need to do that. In fact, I work with a lot of the area health and safety reps who are very often frontline workers, and many of those are unaware how to turn a computer on. So if we want to make sure that people are confident to do this, we have to start from the real basics. And then when we've actually got the technology and the processes and systems that are on your iPad or the system that can prevent you being near trains, we need to actually help them have the skills, knowledge and training to actually use that technology. And it's really important that we provide this to them in a way that works well for them. Many of our frontline staff are kinesthetic learners. That means they learn by doing. And we need to make sure that the training that we give them is about learning by doing, rather than sending them some e-learning. Finally, there's a bit about leaders and how they approach this. We need leaders to understand those differences between themselves and our workforce, and to actually give people the time to feel confident and capable, and to actually be committed to use the new technology. It's exciting having new technology. It's a great need for the future, but we need to make sure that our staff are ready to do that. And finally, when it comes to technology and culture, we very often do technology because somebody in a big organisation like Network Rail comes up with a great new idea, which we really want to encourage. However, we also need to have the communications across the business, because sometimes our technology is done in more than one place, developed in more than one place simultaneously, and that's not efficient and necessarily good use of time. So we need some way of making sure that those great ideas are pooled and that we pull together the people that have them so that we can improve our delivery. Well-being. Well-being is highly important to people in terms of how they are at work. And if you think about culture of the way that we do things around here, the way that we do things is massively impacted by how we are. So there are two elements of well-being, the psychological well-being and the physical well-being. So one is about how we're feeling and one is actually about how our body is. Both of them are affected by the culture and how we work. So let's think of those people who work night shifts. There's a lot of research that working night shifts is not so good for your health. And there are lots of things that we can do as organisations if we think about our culture to make this different. So many people who work night shifts will not eat or drink very much. Now, part of that, not drinking very much in our organisations and not having good availability of welfare facilities. Well, as part of our culture, we need to make that absolute that everybody has good welfare facilities. Sometimes people don't eat very much because the availability of decent food is not very good. We will sometimes have coin machines that people can get some crisps or some chocolate. But how about we make those having healthier snacks in it, or having vans available where they can actually get healthier snacks? That will then have a deep impact on people's physical well-being. Psychological well-being, though, is also equally important. If we don't feel safe psychologically at work, we are less likely to make good decisions. So what sort of things affect safety in terms of psychological safety at work? It's things like understanding your role, being really clear about what's expected of you, having a role that gently stretches you but doesn't overload you, making sure that you have good relationships, being able to influence what goes on around you, being able to talk with your colleagues and feeling safe within your team. So the line management culture in an organisation is really key. Line managers will impact on how people work together, and we need to develop them so that they understand this isn't just about doing activity of booking plans or work like that. And we also need them to be able to have the conversations with people about how they're working with their colleagues. That development requires us to give line managers some time to learn themselves. So there's a lot around positive culture and particularly around safety culture that actually is impacted on well-being and well-being impacts on. The third area that you have been looking at on this day today is around competence and capability. And unless people are competent and capable in their roles, then we're not going to get great delivery for our passengers. But I want to talk about competence being a moment in time. If I'm competent today on an activity with things like differences in technology, new learning, etc., I'm unlikely to be competent on it in a few months' time. And therefore, part of our culture needs to move from being reactive to being proactive. We need to be horizon scanning and saying, what are we going to have that's different in the future that we actually could look at now and start developing people's skills in? The other thing is we very often think about training and development as something that happens in a classroom. And we need to move to that individual learning that has a look at what have we just done now and how did it go? For the moment, we don't have a strong enough culture that allows us to review things that go well. So we only review that small area that goes wrong, which is not such a great pool for learning and activity. So giving time to people at the end of the shift and giving the emphasis on having a look at what went well today that we can learn from and do tomorrow, what didn't go so well today that we need to mitigate and change is really important. The other thing is that learning needs to be an active process. In the past, most of our learning has been about people briefing and giving people information. Exchange of information does not equate to learning. It is just information exchange. And we need to move away from those days of big town hall briefings where people are being spoken to or really even spoken at, to times where people are engaged in having discussions and thinking about the topic. So we need to consider learning as an active process. And that again is part of a change in culture, moving away from telling to engaging. So I'm going to move on and just talk a little bit more about the training and development. So leadership decision making, and line management support and feedback. In more mature cultures, and certainly in more mature safety cultures, development and training is seen as a priority. And you can tell this because the attendance at planned training is at a high level. Our organisation is still too low in terms of the number of people who can turn up and not be called back onto operational duty. Now, whilst there will always be times when that happens, the level to which it happens suggests that either we're not doing good planning for it, or actually it's given a very low priority. The graph here shows the ways that people feel when they go through some learning that is not stuff that they already know about. And it's important to note that actually emotionally it can be quite a hard journey. You can go from that they call the mount of stupid, where actually you don't feel you know very much, so feeling really bad about it before you start to feel, hang on, I can work on this. And therefore line management and peer support is really key. People need to understand that while people are learning to do something new, they need feedback on what's going well, and they need support to actually overcome their anxieties about it. Already talked about the learning styles, and that's very related to this. If we can make sure that we deliver the training that we do in the learning style of the individuals, it's far more likely that that valley of despair will be much smaller. And line managers, again, are key to doing this. They need to know their staff well enough, and they need to give them time to be coaching and mentoring them so that they actually feel more confident in what they're doing. We also need to shift in our culture from just having a look at technical skills. How do I do this specific style? This specific task. We not only do tasks have an activity to do, but actually they are nearly always working with somebody else. So looking at your non-technical skills, looking at how you can assert yourself if you need to and challenge if things aren't being done safely, for example. Looking at how people can multitask and be agile in their thinking. All of these are key for risk management. And if something changes, you've got to make a decision at a moment. Okay, so I think the only other thing there that I want to just pick up is this bit about reinforcing learning. Most people don't learn and embed stuff in one take. So if we really want people to learn something new, we need to repeat information from either mentorship or coaching or a formal course over a period of time to change habits and to change thinking. So the reinforcement and the repeating of things is critical. And finally, I just want to talk about this model because I think it's a good example of how we are impacting on all of the areas that we've talked about and the culture of our organisation. So people who are seen as competent feel confident. Okay, and what are the elements that actually add to that? So there are three elements that people say you need to look competent and feel confident. They are authority, presence, and impact. Authority is about what I know. Presence is about how I am with you. And then impact is the result of that. We do an awful lot of focus on what I know. We don't do enough on how we be. which is the bit around presence. But that's where the focus of culture can help with all these areas. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks, Lynn, for connecting all the panel topics today. It's really valuable to understand how well-being, technology and learning all overlap. I thought you did a fantastic job of that. Our fifth and final panel focuses on training and development, which Lynn will be also joining us for. Investing in employees is one of the most effective ways to improve safety. And development of staff is a crucial approach to mitigating risk to safety at work. Employees need to be equipped with the necessary skills and knowledge to deliver their roles in a way that's safe for them and also safe for their team. And this training and development must stretch across every corner of the network, from station to track, to improve safety in the rail industry as a whole. So here to explain to us the importance of learning how to complete your role in rail safely, we have Neil Robertson, Chief Executive at the National Skills Academy for Rail. We're hoping to be joined very shortly by Richard French-Lowe, Learning and Development Specialist at HS2 Limited, and Lynn Chamberlain-Clark, who we've just heard from very eloquently. So welcome to 2 out of 3 at the minute. And thank you, Lynn, for really summing up our whole day for us. I think you touched on everything we've been speaking about. So we'll kick off with Neil from the National Skills Academy. 2-minute break while we hear what Neil's been up to. What's going well, Neil, in terms of training and development?
I think we've got a stable and comprehensive training offer across the industry, and the new apprenticeships are pretty good. I think it would be possible for us to be a little bit more modern in our approach to competency, but overall it's a solid base to build from, and there's a lot more confidence in the quality of the training now than there was, and many more employers are involved. And we've increased the amount of people being trained, both in technical training and in apprenticeship training. So that's great. And the training providers themselves have had a very tough time through COVID and have shown their commitment to the industry by putting on programs, often when they were loss-making. So they're showing their commitment, and I really hope that they have a good year this year to compensate for that. But overall, decent shape, but plenty to do.
Decent shape, plenty to do. What would you say is going less well?
Well, we've not got enough people. That's the biggest single thing. And it's quite simple, but it's not easy to fix. So though we've increased the number of skilled people in the industry net, we've had a lot of retirals because we have an aging workforce. And there's been lots of very welcome government investment in the industry, which has increased demand. So that's the biggest single thing. Thereafter, it's a bit more technical. As I said, we've got a slightly old-fashioned approach to some of our aspects of competence, and I think we've been slow in developing the digital skills of our workforce. So I think there's scope for more multi-skilling as well.
Good. That's a very good sum up, and lots of material there for Lynn to work with. Let's start off with not enough people, Lynn.
Absolutely right. We've got a real opportunity to get some new blood into the organisation, and new blood that will work not only on getting the capability and the competence that we need, but also it will work on our culture too, because we can choose people who've got the right mindset and attitude for the future. I'd also pick up that, with not enough people, looking at different ways of training people up is really important, because we can do an awful lot more, and are starting to do an awful lot more of on-the-job training. So things like mentorship and coaching, which can mean that, people can go out to do the job with support earlier than they would have done if it was just based in a workshop or a training centre.
And do you agree with Neil that perhaps a bit more of an old-fashioned approach to competency? She's just trying to put her teeth in at the end of the day.
So there is a move. It's definitely moving in the right direction, but we can be a lot more innovative than we are being. I think there's an awful lot of opportunity for things like gamification. certainly in the cultural field, that's something that we're looking at now, because there's an awful lot of people coming into the organisation who've grown up doing games, and they can learn a lot from doing games. Actually working with people that, I talked quite a bit about how a lot of our frontline staff, a lot of our more operational staff will learn through doing. We need to help them do that a lot more. And you can do that with actors, you can do that with, doing interactive and experiential workshops, lots of which we're beginning to do more of, but there's great opportunity to extend that.
Do you see opportunity there, Neil, in gamification? I must admit that's something that hadn't really crossed my mind before Lynn said it. But, having got a 12-year-old boy here who's really flying on his sim, actually, but constantly on the computer and so computer and tech literate, I suppose that's quite a good idea, isn't it?
Absolutely. The problem with it is it's expensive. And that's actually what's been holding us back as much as anything else. But no, we've had a number of kind of planning and review sessions looking forward, and it's certain that will become a much bigger part of what we do. So areas where a number of people need to be trained are right for gamification. And really what you might call it is just very elegant simulations of real environments. It's not to replace the real environment, but it means that people practice. So one that we've been working on recently is fixing the brakes on trains. So people have practiced endlessly, and then when they get into the workshop, they need less time. As Lynn said, they can become competent more quickly. And if anybody thinks that sounds like a bad idea, well, don't get in an aeroplane, because that's exactly how they teach pilots, and that seems to work pretty well. In fact, it's been shown in some pilots to help them become very good when they were otherwise naturally just okay. So it's part of the future, and of course it's how we train train drivers as well. And we see a lot of scope for it in coping with different environments, what you might expect out on the track, particularly, and we've had a lot of storms and resilience type work to do recently. Again, it lends itself to different scenarios like that.
I think, well, just, thinking when I call Jack through for tea and he's usually busy landing a plane at Gatwick and he's got all the air traffic control lingo, makes me realise, you are absolutely right. We can learn a lot from aviation. My RAF colleagues who, start off learning to fly Tornadoes and aircraft like that, it's all through the simulator. Lynn, how do we get around the fact, though, that, as Neil says, it's expensive, isn't it? And, often so much boils down to funding and available cash.
Yeah, it certainly does. I think it's really targeting what's the benefit and best place to actually put it. It's not a fix for everything. We need a sort of a multitude of different ways of delivering it. And I also think that the cost of it's going to come down quite dramatically in the next few years. I spent a couple of weekends ago going to something on virtual reality. The degree to which that has come on in the last 5 years and how much easier it is to use things like that. When we started looking at in Network Rail about 5-6 years ago, it was really prohibitive, but it's a lot less prohibitive now. So I think, I don't think we can really approach any of this with one size fits all, but having lots of different ways that we can do this, understanding and doing more personalised learner journeys. And that, again, is part of this for me, having a bit better idea of how, Bob Smith needs to learn, or, Sally Jones needs to learn, so that we can tailor it and give the bits that they need, because not everybody will need it as a gamification, but some people will benefit.
It is a real multi-layered approach, and I mean, Lynn's right, isn't she, Neil? People learn in different ways, and it's tailoring that learning to individuals, I suppose, making learning perhaps a bit more bespoke where possible.
Absolutely, and all good trainers do that, and I think that as we increase the training of trainers, I think we will be looking more for more of that from our trainers, a more personalized style. But just to go back to the gamification, one of our strategic aims as an industry is to demonstrate greater social value. And that's right, because we get a lot of government investment, so we need to show the return on investment. The government call it levelling up, we call it social value, but it's the same thing. But what that means in practice is trying to engage girls and boys, men and women, but especially girls and boys, who perhaps haven't had such a great time at school, and but attract them into the industry, both into Network Rail and to the supply chain. And that's really important. And we think that gamification will particularly help us there, perhaps with people who are less confident with pen and paper. And it's as our roles have become more complex, we've actually moved from, this is slightly technical, but go with it. We've gone from being a level 2.5 industry to being a level 3 industry. And it means that it's harder to get into our apprenticeships now because of the maths and the English and some of the IT requirements. So we've got to do more to reach out to people in communities to give them, if you like, a bridge into the industry, because that natural step that they might have taken in the past is a bigger one than it used to be.
So as you were saying that, how at Network Rail, Lynn, do you reach out to the community, and how do you manage to create that bridge, if you like, to bring, particularly as Neil was saying, sort of boys and girls, school age children, to motivate them and make them realize that, the rail's changed, and that there was anything wrong with the way the rail was in the old days. It's very different. And to a young person, I would imagine, hosting lots of these events, that a lot of people don't realize the opportunities and the exciting careers that exist in rail, because we tend to have that kind of stereotypical image, don't we, of what happens on our railways.
So yes, we're doing lots around that. There's an awful lot of work being done to support STEM activities in schools at all levels. A multitude of activities that are resources for teachers. There's work going on in places like Scouts to actually engage, people doing, risk-based and safety-based badges that tells them all about the railway. And also a lot of us use our volunteer time to go in and talk to schools. So there's an awful lot of work that goes on, going in and just telling them about, I work in the rail industry. This is what I do in the rail industry. Bet you didn't know that they had a culture change lead in the rail industry. Well, this is what I do, and here are the sort of things my colleagues do.
Gosh,
so
at a time when we have, skill shortages, all of that's really valuable, isn't it, Neil, to hear from people like Lynn, and for people like Lynn to bring jobs to life.
Oh, it's brilliant. And I'm speaking, in fact, at the conference. There's a conference this week on Thursday in Manchester for all of the STEM ambassadors, as they're called. And they're just wonderful. And they're so enthusiastic. And you just think, what great ambassadors they are for our industry and for STEM generally. I think the thing I would add to Lynn's answer to your question, and I think something we need to get better at, is work experience. Because not all, as I said, this idea of a bridge between where people are in their communities and our advanced high-value jobs, and it's a big step. And work experience is one of the proven things that we've been using to build that bridge. And it's not just in the infrastructure side. The train operators are good at this as well. GTR, perhaps particularly, but lots of them are involved in it. And it's going to become normal in the next 2 or 3 years for there to be lots of work experience opportunities that, so working with local colleges and training providers, you take a bunch of perhaps slightly disaffected kids, but you offer them the promise of an interview. And you try we have a slightly basically we lie to kids, don't we? We lie to them about the Tooth Fairy and about Santa and then about careers. And we don't tell them the truth. And we've actually got lots of high-paid, good jobs, but we're a bit sort of coy about that. And we say, oh, it's lovely, but actually the truth is that there's some great jobs, but they're not easy to get. And if we can build a more of a ladder from where they are to where to where we are, rather than saying let's let the market take care of that, because it won't. It's failing just now in that respect. People are kids are going to university and college and doing the wrong things, and wrong for the economy, not wrong for intellectually, but wrong for the economy. So we need them to understand, where are the jobs? You want to pay back that loan, right? Here's where the jobs are. And NSAR does a lot of that with our skills forecasting and telling. So we need to tell the kids a bit more of the truth about where the jobs are in the future economy that will allow them to make the choices they want to make. Not to say you shouldn't do other things, but just to give them some facts.
Oh, you're so right. And that's kind of resonates really strongly with me, having got an 18-year-old daughter who's going to uni in September. You know, you turn the news on today and, you know, one of the headlines is that, you know, she'll be paying back her loans into her 60s or something like that, which is all fairly depressing. But also so many of my friends' kids have come out, bright kids have come out of university with, you know, first class degrees, and then they're ringing me saying, do you know anybody who might be able to give me a job or some work experience? And I think it's really important, Lynn, isn't it, to try and create, you know, match up what youngsters are doing and studying with where our future economy lies. And that makes sense for all of us, not just you as employers, but also for them as well, to be able to come out educated well and then find themselves a good job.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that links up with, you know, our recruitment. Again, it goes back to culture, our recruitment and retention, and how we work through that. How do we look for the right people? How do we understand, you know, the kind of skills and interests and passions that a young person has, and the kind of jobs that we could aim them to. We need to do more on our interviews to make them even better for them, as well as, you know, the build on from work experience. I was reflecting as we were talking there that I've been involved in some of our graduate interviews, and they've really become far more sophisticated I've been doing them for about 6-7 years now. And then now, you know, a real assessment centre where they have a real opportunity to not only shine and show themselves, but to really find out about the organisation and different parts of the organisation they may want to go to. And even if they then don't get on our graduate scheme, they go away and tell people what a fantastic experience it was and what a great place it is to work. So again, I think we have opportunity in how we get people in to, even if they're not successful, they are successful, we really hope they'll say it's fantastic anyway, but even if they're not, to you know, make it a desired place to work.
Absolutely. And Neil, what is the current position on skills shortages? Where are the big gaps, if you like?
In most of the engineering disciplines, project management, signaling and telecoms being the top, anything to do with high voltage. And you hear a lot, don't you, about green jobs? Well, green jobs are mainly engineering jobs, because green projects are engineering projects typically. So if your son or daughter doesn't know what to do, they should become a signaling or telecoms engineer, a high voltage engineer, or a data scientist or analyst.
But then you see, Neil, that's something that we wouldn't talk about around the dinner table, isn't it?
No,
I've sat here and said to my kids, this is what you should be, because I'm not that familiar with those jobs, I guess.
Well, we don't tell them the truth. It's not your fault. We don't blame you, because no one's told you. But we have now, by the way.
I tell you what, they know the tooth fairy doesn't exist, because every time Jack loses a tooth, he wakes up in the morning and he's like, didn't come again. I'm like, oh dear, not tooth fairy, hey?
But honestly, people do more research into which washing machine to buy than they do into their future career.
Yeah,
and we really need to, we've got a website called Roots into Rail, which is an industry website supported by Network Rail, HS2, and a lot of the supply chain. And that really gives some of those facts with videos from credible people, not old people like me, but credible younger people saying, this is what it's like to do my job. So please, rootsintorail.org, please put that in front of your kids, Helen. But we're starting to reach out, but we've got to get cleverer, because, you know, social media moves so fast, and that's not something that we're particularly, let's say, up to date with. So, you know, TikTok, you know, we are not, Roots into Rail is not on TikTok, and it should be, shouldn't it? So there's an example of how we're always trying to keep up, but at least we've got some facts and figures there. But there's something else to say about the skills shortages. I made the point about market failure, which sounds a bit dull, but just think about this for a minute. What happens when you've got skills shortages? You get wage inflation, which is great for the people with those skills, but bad for the industry, because whatever job we're doing costs a lot more by the end of it, because we've had to pay wage inflation. So actually, it's in everybody's best interest to train more people to reduce the wage inflation, because it's a lot more expensive to pay the wage inflation than it is to actually take on an apprentice and train them up. So we you know, Lynn's talking a lot about culture. This culture of not training until we're absolutely certain we've got 5 years of work ahead of us, we need to change that culture as well, and we are, but it's still a long way to go.
And is that something that's changing within Network Rail, Lynn? Have you seen that changing?
I think it's beginning to, yeah. I think we have got lots more to do, and I think we also need to have that culture of understanding that most young people today probably won't stay in the same career forever, and that's something. And it goes back to that, you know, let's plan, let's train people up, let's get them into a role they like, let's give them the opportunity that they can move around the business, but also accept that if we get 5 really good years out of them, that was really worth having. And they may go on to something else, because as I say, most people are expected to have, you know, 3 to 5 careers during their work time now, not just one like we did.
Yeah, no, although we're now moving into other careers, aren't we? And I think embracing it as well. I think it's good to develop and have a number of, I don't know, career portfolio, do they call it? That sounds very fancy, but do more than one thing. How are we doing, Neil, in terms of diversity? Are we making progress?
Yes. Well, I could try and give you a positive spin and say the fact is we've doubled gender diversity in the last 5 years. Now that sounds quite good, but we've gone from 8 to 16%. So to say we're at 16% overall is not very good. So the answer is we've put our toe in the water. In terms of ethnic diversity, harder to have the exact figures. We think we've done relatively well on Asian ethnic diversity, less well on Black ethnic diversity. The good news is, I think, and this is perhaps a cultural point, Lynn will tell me if it is, that I think it's the settled will of the industry now to become more diverse. I think everybody feels it in their head as well as their heart now. And I think, I think the genie's out the bottle, but we have quite low turnover of staff, so it does take a long time. I think, as Lynn mentioned earlier, the opportunities of the current skill shortages and taking on lots of people mean that we could probably be a bit more aggressive in our thinking in this space. But, you know, really, Helen, it's not something we're not in a position we're proud of at all. And it's not because the big companies don't try everything to remove unintentional bias, all of that. It's more just that we've got a real challenge that starts back at school. And, you know, that we can't blame society for it. We just need to do more to reach out, as you've heard us doing, to persuade particularly young girls and people from more diverse backgrounds that the railway is a place for them.
Yeah, and I know that's something, Lynn, at Network Rail, a lot of work is done in that space, isn't it? Absolutely,
and certainly from a safety culture point of view, a diverse and inclusive workforce is absolutely essential. We've still got loads more to do, and I was just reflecting. My husband's a teacher in a secondary school. We've been having conversations about how do you get people into not just seeing university as the only option, but seeing careers in other organisations is really positive. And we were reflecting that, you know, aspirations from different cultures are quite different, and that there's probably some work to do with different ethnic groups to help educate in terms of opportunity. But you know, I think we talk to the kids, but maybe we need to talk to the whole community to see what's available, so that actually it's a preferred route into workplace.
And Lynn, safety culture is part of organisational culture. You touched on it a bit in your presentation, but how do we really bring this together?
So, yeah, absolutely. Safety culture is part of the organisational culture. There's so much more that actually impacts on it. So we've just talked about diversity and inclusion. You know, diverse and inclusive organisations have lots of different perspectives, and then you actually have a much safer place because you've got lots of different perspectives looking at the same thing, and you have a much more robust answer. So what's key to this for me is leadership understanding this and not saying we'll do safety over here, we'll do D&I over here, we'll do security over here. Actually understanding that the decisions we make and how we make them, how we work together, what values we have in working with each other. So it's all really about the relationships we create and therefore how we work with our colleagues and enable them to do their jobs well. So that fundamentally is organisational culture, but it's absolutely safety culture too.
And how are competence and capability enabled by a mature safety culture?
So the more mature the safety culture is, the more competence and capability are, as I talked about, are seen as a continuum, as something that we need to be looking at today, tomorrow and ongoing. So for starters, we don't have a competence that stops today. We're thinking about what's happening next year or 2 years' time or 5 years' time. So we're moving to a more proactive rather than a reactive culture. And that's a fundamental in really getting competence right at the time we need it. And the other thing is this understanding that competence is more than just the technical skills of a job. It's actually takes in how you do the job, from how you work with people and, your attitude to it. And that links hugely with safety, because if your attitude is just to get it done quickly, you're probably not very safe. So,
Neil, do you want to add Lynn's thoughts there?
Oh, I totally agree with what Lynn says. I think an area that we really need to focus on within this is our supervisors. And I think that that's a group of people who could become much stronger allies in creating and recreating every day the safety culture that we need. And I think that's an area we've neglected. We've trained fewer supervisors percentage-wise than other industries, other equivalent industries. And I think that's an area who, because they are the people at the front line, and there's a lot more we could achieve if we had them on board and being proactive, as Lynn says. I think the word proactive is the most important thing for us to remember here. But great comments from Lynn. Totally agree.
And what about social value, Neil? How can we create more social value?
Well, the railway creates new jobs in areas of disadvantage. It does that already, and it will be doing a lot more of that. So what we need to do is make sure that we're A, measuring and recognizing that, and we're starting to, but B, we are making sure, it links back to the work experience point, that we are really making sure that the most disadvantaged parts of the communities that we serve are getting the benefits of these access to these good jobs. And I think that's the single biggest, it's almost an existential challenge for future rail investment. If we don't get, with HS2 and the new enhancement program for Network Rail, if we don't prove strong social value, I think we won't get money in future.
And last word to you, Lynn, on social value.
So, an organisation that's actually delivering people all around and items all around the country is doing social value in every decision it makes. We've seen with a lot of the problems following the pandemic, just how fragile some of our systems can be. And we need to work with our communities to be able to deliver what they need, when they need, at that moment in time. So that's everything in that is to do with social value, as well as giving people jobs.
You've both been fantastic to end today with. I'm sorry we didn't get Richard Frenchlow from HS2 Limited. I'm sure he would have added to the conversation in a different way, but it was actually very nice for me just to have a kind of one-on-one with both of you. So, and thank you for working doubly hard, Lynn, and also doing presentations. So thank you very much indeed. And thank you for everyone who's taken time out to join us today. We really have covered a breadth challenges, opportunities and solutions as we've engaged with the topic of rail safety. Whether you're one of our speakers or part of our audience sending in questions, taking the time to listen and sparking conversations with other delegates, a big thank you from the team here at RTM 3
also to our fantastic event
partners, without whom events like this wouldn't be able to take place. I look forward to seeing many of you again at our event on workforce, which is taking place on the 28th of April. Please share and encourage them to come along too. If you're a winner in our gamification challenge, the RTM team will be in touch to discuss your prize options. Separate to gamification, today's event, as you know, was Cpd with 1 CPD point earned for every hour of live content watched. If you'd like your Cpd certificate, then please email marketing@cognitivepublishing.com. From me and everyone at RTM 365, thank you for attending today and giving us your time and attention. I hope you have a lovely evening. See you soon.